Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Movies, they're pretty good. I'm your host, Travis Dudding, and today we're talking about one of my more recent favorites. This is also the first one I'm covering from, I'd say probably my favorite director, Paul Thomas Anderson. But today we're doing Phantom Thread from 2017. All right, no use lollygagging. Let's get right into it. Opening, obviously, you get a nice little beautiful title card right there in the beginning. A little bit of ominous music, and we see a woman like lit by like firelight, and she's talking to someone and saying like Reynolds is a very demanding man, like maybe he's the most demanding man, and but we don't really know what she's talking about. It's just kind of like laying the groundwork for what's to come. And we'll later find out her name is Alma. She's played by Vicky Cripes. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but great actress. She's amazing in this. And so then after that, it cuts to a shot of Daniel Day-Lewis getting ready. It's his name is Reynolds Woodcock. Very interesting name. You see him like it's his daily getting ready routine and everything. Very soft music, just very calming too. The music in this might be one of my favorite, if not my favorite, film soundtracks, because Johnny Greenwood from Radiohead was the composer on this. Did a great job. Paul Thomas Anderson uses him a lot, so but I think this is his best one, in my opinion. So it's just him getting ready, and we see from the outside that it's this like beautiful London townhouse, and we see that the employees coming in, and then we see them getting started on like, we see like dress mannequins, things like that, and you figure out that, I mean, I'm sure if you've seen the movie or know about the movie, you know that he's a stylist, a dressmaker for fancy rich women and stuff like that. And we see them all getting ready for the day and everything. And then it cuts to a shot at breakfast. There's a woman there sitting with him, along with the sister, Cyril. And they're eating breakfast, and Joanna offers Reynolds a croissant or something like that. I forget what it is. But he's like, no, like I told you no more stodgy things. And then she's just like, no, you never told me that. Maybe you told someone else that, kind of trying to start a fight with them. And then she just asks him, like, where have you gone? Like, what happened to the Reynolds I used to know? And just those types of questions, so you could see that they're together, but they've had a falling out at this point. And Reynolds just like, no, like, I'm not doing this. I can't start my day with a confrontation. Like, not today. Like, so no, I'm not going to do this. So then he just gets up and leaves. No, she gets up and leaves. And, actually, I don't remember. I think she gets up and leaves. And then we see that a customer for the day has arrived. It's the Countess Henrietta. I forget the last name. So she's coming in for dress fitting, and we just see like all these customers are just in love with Reynolds. Like, he's just a charming man, and he's handsome and everything. So they just love him, and they feel so like, and he's like making them feel beautiful. You can tell, you can catch like their little insecurities here and there, and he seems to be like helping them with that. So I think that's a big part of it too. And so yeah, she's getting her dress for some event. They never say what it is or anything like that. But there's something going on, and then because she talks to Reynolds one-on-one and just says like, after everything we've been through, and something like that, like like this is gonna be nice or something like that. It'll be nice to feel good. And then we see her like making like a grand entrance at some kind of event. She's going down like the staircase and everything. There's photographers, paparazzi, and everything like that. But they never like show what it is. And then up in the balcony, we see Reynolds' sister, Cyril, played by Leslie Manville, and she was nominated for this for the Best Supporting Actress, but didn't win. I forget who won that year, but amazing. She's really great in this. And so she's up in the balcony, like looking down, like just kind of overseeing the public appearance of their product to make sure it's worn with dignity and things like that, because they're very, very proud. So it's like, don't want anyone making a fool of themselves. And we'll get into that a little bit more later in the movie. So then we see, and then she leaves from that event and goes to meet Reynolds for dinner at a restaurant. And immediately she's like, so what do you want me to do about Joanna? And he's like, I don't know. Like, and she says, the time has come. Like, you need to let her go. She can't just sit around getting fat waiting for you to fall in love with her again. And then he's just like, you can just see he's so beat that this like work takes so much out of him. And she tells him like, why don't you go to the country house tonight? You leave tonight and I'll meet you there tomorrow. And he's like, okay, like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. And but also while they're at dinner, he's saying like he's been having all these having this unsettled feeling, and he's having these reoccurring dreams about their mother, and that and he's like, oh, like I find it comforting to think that the dead are watching over us. I don't find it spooky at all. And then, but she doesn't really say anything about it. But this is like and he'll mention the mother like later on down the line and everything. We'll get more on her story in a little bit. But then, so we see him driving out to the country. He obviously leaves in the middle of the night and then arrives in the morning. They don't really say where he's gone, like what town, but I love these shots of the car driving. It's I had to look it up. I'm not like a car guy, but it's a Bristol 405 sedan, and it's like a nice old classic luxurious English car, and just like a really cool, lots of cool shots of the car driving and everything like that from the back and from the front. He gets into town. He's going to have breakfast at the local restaurant. And this is where we're going to meet Alma, or where he's going to meet Alma. Because he notices the waitress come into the room, and she kind of bumps into the table on accident and then kind of smiles at him from across the room. And yeah, he's kind of smiling back at her. She finally comes over to take his order, and he basically like orders the entire menu. And like even she's like really, like, you want more? Because he's like ordering like a Welsh rabbit with a poached egg and sausages and bacon and biscuits and all this stuff. So, and like multiple types of spreads for the biscuits, everything. He's just ordering the whole restaurant. And then so she's writing everything down, and then he says, "Can I see?" And he takes the page off of her notebook and asks like, "Will you remember?" And she says yes. And he's like, "Okay, like I'm keeping this." And so she goes and back and comes back with all the food and everything. And when she comes back and brings the food, he asks like, "Will you have dinner with me?" And then she says yes, and then gives him a piece of paper. And so she's already like was wanting this to happen too, because she already has on a piece of paper, "For the hungry boy, my name is Alma." So she's like, they're obviously a strong connection right off the bat with them. And so then we see him picking her up for dinner, and they go to some restaurant, presumably another restaurant that that'd be kind of shitty. Like, you go out on a date and they just take you to the place where you work. But Oh yeah. So we see him just like admiring her at the table, just like looking at her while she's eating, um, and he like gets his napkin wet and wants to take her lipstick off, and just like, I like to see who I'm talking to, and because he wants to see, he's like one of those like weird like quote unquote nice guys that that like, oh, I don't think women should wear makeup, but then they're like, in turn they're just like being as controlling. They're like, oh, but it's like the makeup companies want you to think, but yeah, you're just kind of an asshole. And so then he's asking like, oh, do you look like your mother, and like, can I see a picture of her? And she's like, no, I don't have it here, like it's at my house. And he tells her, like, it gets like real serious, and he says, carry her with you, like always keep her with you. And so she's like, oh, okay, well, if that's the case, then where's yours? And he says, here in the canvas. And she asks, what do you mean? And he says that you can sew anything into the lining of a coat or dress or anything like that. And he says that he puts little secrets, coins, messages, all kinds of stuff into everything that he makes. And then so she's intrigued by it, as anyone would be. And we see them driving home for dinner, from dinner, and just like speeding through the town and everything at night. And like I said, another cool shot. Like every shot of the car is always great. And so he's showing her a picture that's not in his jacket of his mom, and just saying like, oh, this was I made this wedding dress for her when I was 16, and like that he pretty much had to do it mostly by himself because the woman there, I think I forget who it was, either someone who worked for the mom or was like their caretaker, something like that, like a nanny, something, and that she wouldn't help because there's this superstition about making wedding dresses, and like the superstition is that like a woman who makes or touches a wedding dress before she's married will never get married. And he's like just talking about like, so people like, they don't want to make the dresses, and the models don't want to wear them, all that kind of type of stuff. And but he says that his sister Cyril had helped him finish the dress. And then Alma asks, like, did Cyril ever get married? And he just says no, so it's like maybe there is something to the superstition. They're just kind of like putting it out there, and so then they're talking by the fire and everything, and she asks him like, hey, like, you're a very handsome man, I bet like a lot of women are around you all the time, like how come you've never been married? And he gives a couple excuses and stuff, but the main key thing that he says is that I think marriage would make me deceitful, and I never want to become that. But then he says like, hey, like, can you do something for me? And they go upstairs, and he starts taking her measurements and everything, and like, so presume that he's going to make a dress for her, and try and pinning up like I don't know what it is, but like putting in different pins and everything. And then Cyril shows up and asks her to take down write down the measurements as he's measuring, basically. And almost kind of like, okay, like, who's this that's showing up? Oh, but then the weird thing is, like, when she does like get there, and she's like, oh, who's this lovely creature making the house smell so good? And then she like leans in, like goes and like introduces herself, but then like leans in to like smell Alma, and like Alma's like, okay, this is kind of weird, but she doesn't say anything. It's just all in the facial expressions. And so she starts taking down the measurements, and like he gets to her bust, and he's like, oh, like, you have no breasts. And she's like annoyed, like, yeah, like, sorry. Yeah, and he's like, no, like, you're fine, you're perfect, like, it's my job to give you some. But she's not sure how she feels about that statement and everything, because it just, like, everything turned, like, real weird all of a sudden. And then once they're done with the measurements, then he writes oh wait, oh yeah, once they're done with the measurements and he's like goes to get something else, then Cyril tells her, like, you have the perfect shape, like the perfect body type, like he loves women with a little bit of belly. And then she's like, and then she doesn't say anything, but like she kind of like is taken aback by it, like, what, like what the hell. And so then it cuts away. We see them talking and walking, like a little montage of them like spending time together out in the country. They're walking by the water and everything, and Alma's like narrating, because she's still having that, like, so the narration will come in, but it's still that same conversation that we see in the very, very beginning. And she's talking about how she never really liked herself, but in his, I feel as though I didn't like this about myself, and this and this and this, and that, like, he like took away all those insecurities, like I said before. And then we see them talking there by the water, and he's like, I feel as though I've been looking my whole life for you. And then she says, well, you found me. And then they just kind of smile at each other, but then she says, like, whatever you do, make sure you do it carefully. You know, just like, hey, like, if you want to be together, like, let's, like, be careful, you know, that type of thing. And then back in the narration, she says, like, in his work, I feel perfect. And, but then we see them at dinner. They're back, he's taken her back to London with him, and they're at dinner with Cyril and someone else. Oh yeah, they're just at dinner together, and then Cyril shows up, and then, but it's funny because they're like, Reynolds and Cyril are like sitting all close together, and it's almost like Alma's the third wheel. And so it's like, it's a very weird brother sister dynamic, but it never turns like oh, are they like, is it like a weird sexual brother sister thing? You never get that vibe, but it is just like an uncomfortable closeness, like too close, but nothing, not sinister, but you know what I mean. Nothing over the line, I would say. Very gray area, weird brother sister relationship. So they get back to the house, and they're staying in separate rooms, but he's like, mine's just right next door. Make sure you get a lot of rest, because we're going to start very early in the morning. And it's just like, oh, how early? And then in the narration, we see a shot of her standing in the whatever room where they are taking the measurements and everything at his actual house, and it's like, it's still dark outside and everything, and it's just the two of them. And she's saying in the voiceover that sometimes they start at 4 a.m. after having been gone to bed at midnight. So, but he's just like an animal when it comes to work, and she's saying like, well, I can stand for hours, like I'm very good at it, like, and I don't mind, and everything like that. So then they're always at the same table at the same restaurant, by the way. Every time in London, it's always the same restaurant, and it's always the same table. So they're having dinner again. It's Alma, Reynolds, Cyril, and then someone, I forget the name, but it's like their manager or something. He's somehow involved in the business. And some two girls walk up to the table, like Mr. Reynolds, like, I love your work. And then the other girl's like, yeah, she loves you so much. Like, she says she wants to be buried in one of your dresses. And they just kind of say, like, thank you, like, and be polite. And then they walk away. And then Reynolds jokes to the manager guy, like, and you'd probably dig her up and sell the dress again. And it's like, how can you blame me? And but then Alma kind of gives him a look like, hey, like, you want to get out of here and maybe get a little frisky, because she says like hey, like, have you finished eating yet, because you're looking a little thirsty, if you know what I mean. She doesn't say if you know what I mean, but the other thing is the exact quote. And so then they're like speeding home at that point. He's like, yeah, like, ready to get it on. And love that shot, though. I think that's my favorite car shot of them, like, driving home, because he's, like, all smiling. You can see the glow of the dash or the street lights on their faces, and she's just, like, staring at him, like, and, like, adoring him and everything. It's just a really cool shot. And I love the lighting on it, too. I think that's the big part of it. So then it's breakfast, and, you know, she's all smirking when he comes in and everything, and they smile at each other. But then she starts to prepare her food, like, at the table, and everything is, like, extremely loud. Like, she pulls the chair out and it's, like, amplified, and he's, like, getting annoyed because it's like she's clinking stuff together and she's buttering her toast, and you can hear the and it's like you find out that he, like, can't stand all these, like, little noises, like people that don't like when you chew with your mouth open or clink on the silverware with your teeth, all that stuff. Like, he's, like, really big on not hearing any of that stuff. And so he gets all, like, it's entirely too loud for breakfast. Like, why is it this loud? Like, I can't concentrate if breakfast is ruined, then my day is ruined, you know, because that's where I start. And so he, like, gets mad and walks away, and Cyril's telling Alma, like, yeah, like say, kind of reiterating what he's said, and she's like, well, I didn't know. And she's like, oh, that's okay, like, of course you didn't, like, but now you do, so be quiet at breakfast. But what's great about this is when they filmed this, they in order to, like, make everything super loud, I think they mic'd the table, so, and, like, cranked up that gain, because the effect is for you to hear it the way Reynolds is hearing it, you know, like, make it super annoying, like, that it's like the loudest toast buttering you've ever heard in your life. And even, like, my cats were, like, all ears perked up and looking around at all the noises, so it hit them in the right frequency too. They're like, whoa, what the hell is that? And then and then when Cyril tells Alma this, and she's like, well, like, still, like, I think he's just being too fussy. And then Cyril, like, gives her a look like whatever, like, just know, like, be careful. And so then we get before we get this montage of, like, modeling and things like that, he's making a dress that, you know, and using Alma for the model and the measurements, all that stuff. And he's talking about this fabric, and he says this fabric's from this Flemish lace fabric from the 1600s, and that he rescued it during the war in Antwerp. And so that, like, this is the only, like, throwaway line that says that he was in World War II, and but he found this, like, beautiful vintage fabric, and we see the dress, and it is really pretty and everything. We see the modeling shots, and this big long montage of Alma's modeling, and he's, like, taking pictures for newspapers with her, and then there's a fashion show at their house and everything, and he's backstage going crazy, like no, like, put this on, you get out there, go, you know. And then he's also, like, has a little, like, the little peephole you have in your front door, he has one of those just, like, out into the modeling room. That way he can make sure, like, he can kind of, like, keep an eye on it, but also keep being busy and stuff too. And then it seems to go well and everything, but then we just see it all, like, quiets down, and we see him getting into the car with Alma, but he just, like, gets in the front seat and just, like, is just defeated. Like, he's just so, like, beat, he's tired, everything, and Alma says, like, do you want me to drive? And then he just nods yes. And then she's saying in the voiceover how, like, he works so hard, but then he crashes, basically. But that when he does crash, he's, like, soft and tender like a baby, and he's more open and emotional and everything like that. So, like, she likes the way he is, like, once he's crashed and everything. So then we see Alma is with the maid for the country house, and they're out in the woods, like, foraging for mushrooms, for cooking and stuff like that. And then she's asking, like, hey, like, which ones are the poisonous ones again? Like, you know, to look out for them. And she's like, oh, like, the poisonous ones have gills, but also always refer to the book in the kitchen that'll tell you, like, which ones are poisonous and non-poisonous. So that's a little foreshadowing for later. And she also, and then after they're done foraging, they're in the kitchen. She's looking at the book and everything. And then the maid is saying, like, reminding Alma, like, hey, like, we got to cook them in butter, but not too much butter, because Mr. Woodcock hates the taste of too much butter, you know. And then going back to London again, and Cyril mentions that, like, one of his clients, Barbara Rose, is getting married again, and she's going to want you to make the dress, and she's also going to want you to go to the wedding, and I think you should accept, because Barbara Rose basically pays for the house. And he's like, no, like, why would you tell me this now? Why would you tell me this at breakfast? This is very unsettling. He's very, like, overreacty about it, but she's like, well, doesn't matter. Like, she's the one paying for this house because she's getting married every year, apparently. And so she's coming in for the fitting. We see her, like, she's very, like, they don't confirm, but it seems like she's very drunk. She's, like, almost stumbling up the stairs. She's very, like very loose and everything. And but she's getting through the fitting and everything, and then she starts crying, like, in one part, but then she's like, Reynolds, like, please come, like, please do this for me. And then he's like, oh, okay, like, it does accept her wedding invitation. And then we see a press conference with her. So she's getting married to some guy from the Dominican Republic, and I'm not sure if he's royalty, if he's just a politician, but he's someone big, because there's this big press conference about it, obviously. And so they're, like, interviewing them, and, like, hey, like, what does she bring to the table? What do you bring to the table? That type of stuff. And but she's also, like, kind of out of it during that as well. And then it cuts to the wedding, and she's, like, about to, she does, like, actually, like, pass out and hit her head on the table, basically, because she's just so drunk already. And and Alma and Reynolds are there, and Alma's getting, like, like, they're both, like, look so annoyed, and she's like, no, like, she can't be acting like that, and you're in your dress, she's making a fool of you. We need to do something about this. And they're like, all right, fine, like, let's go. And then so they go, and, like, they're pounding on the door of the because she also gets, like, carried out after she passes out on the table. So they the son and someone else carry her out. And so then they go up to her hotel room and start pounding on the door. And the lady answers, and she's like, they're like, we need the dress. And we're like, she can't, like, Mrs. Rose is sleeping. And it's like, what are you talking about? Like, so, like, that doesn't matter. Like, still need the dress. And she's like, she's sleeping. It's like, is she sleeping in the dress? And she's like, well, yeah, like, we'll go and take it off of her. And then she's like, I'm not going to do that. And then he's like, Alma, you go do it. And then so Alma goes in the room while Reynolds is standing at the door, and he just looks so pissed. And then Alma starts to take the dress off of her and just, like, trying to get it off of her while she's all passed out. And then the son comes in to help, I think. And then I don't know if it's the maid or just, like, an assistant or whoever she is, relative, she's helping too. And then they finally get the dress off, and they're heading out the door. And then Alma says, like, inform Mrs. Rose that she is not. Wait, I have it written down exactly. Oh yeah, she can no longer behave like this in a dress by the House of Woodcock, and just kind of like, no, like, this is your last one unless you're gonna be presentable in public, basically. And so they're walking home with the dress and everything, and then they stop to like kiss each other, and they're kind of staring into each other's eyes because they just had this like great moment where they were perfectly synced and on the same page and everything, and he's loving it, she's loving it. So yeah, then it's like you could tell he's like all juiced up about it too. And then they go home, but then it just cuts away, and then we see these cars arriving with flags on them, and they're pulling up to the house. And then this young woman gets out, and she's being escorted in. And then come to find out, she's the Princess Mona from Belgium, I think, is where she's supposed to be from. That's what the flags were, but they never actually say. Oh yeah, they do say later, like, the dress needs to be delivered to Belgium. That's right. And then we see her like talking to Reynolds, just being like, hey, like, like, he's asking like, how do you envision your wedding dress, and this and this and this, and like, what kind of materials, and there's going to be some lace and a couple other things. And but then they're doing the measurements and everything, and Alma's a little jealous of this princess, you can already tell. And so she's like, basically like goes up to the princess and is like, hey, like, I live here, like, just so you know, like, he's mine, basically. But even though she's, doesn't seem to have any interest in him, but she's like, hey, like, stay away from my man, basically. And oh yeah, so then Alma talks to Cyril in her office and is like, hey, like, I want to do a surprise for Reynolds and just like show him how much I care about him and how much I love him. And I was thinking, like, maybe when you guys go home, I can have the house to myself and make him dinner and all this stuff. And Cyril's like, no, that's not a good idea. Like, trust me, like, he hates surprises, and no matter how nice you think you're being, like, it's not going to work. Like, you're not going to get the desired effect, basically. But Alma's persistent about it. She's like, no, like, I want to do this for him. I want to love him the way, like, I like to. And she's like, okay, like, I tried to warn you, basically, but, And then we see her leaving with all the other employees, and Alma's got the house to herself, and she's waiting there on the stairs in her dress when Reynolds gets home. But like, right off the bat, he's like, what's going on? Like, where is everybody? And she's like, hey, like, I love you, like, I wanted to surprise you. And he's like, doesn't even ask, like, he just says, where's Cyril? And she's like, she's gone home. He's like, where? Like, I don't know, like, she's gone out, like, she'll be back later. And he's just like so annoyed. You could tell, like, that Cyril was right about the surprise thing and everything, but he's just being like super rude about it too. And then he's like going upstairs, he's like, all right, like, and she's like, oh, I've made us dinner, and he's just like, well, I'm gonna take a bath first, and comes back in like pajamas basically to the table when she's all in this like beautiful gown. And oh yeah, first he like makes himself a martini and everything before he sits down. And so he finally sits at the table and gets the pepper shaker and like spends like a minute shaking pepper on it, like uses the whole jar almost, it seems like. And then he like literally takes one piece of asparagus and dips like 1 millimeter of the tip in the butter and then eats it. And then she's like, hey, like, do you like it? And he like says yes, but she's like, no, like, I know you're lying, like. And then an argument breaks out. It's like why would, like, I hate butter, like, I always eat my asparagus with oil and salt, like, so you like prepared it with butter on purpose to, get at me or something like that. So it's just the whole big argument. It's completely ridiculous. Like, and like he accuses her of being a spy coming to kill him, and he's like, show me your gun, and he's like, what? Like, no, like, get out of here. And she finally like gets up and leaves and everything. So then we see her looking up we see the book, like it's like zoomed in, and it's like mushrooms, poisonous versus non-poisonous, and she's looking up the poisonous mushroom, and we see her holding up a poisonous mushroom and comparing it to the picture, and she's cutting it up, she's mincing it, she's grinding it and everything, and then we see a pot of tea that she's sprinkling the ground up poisonous mushroom into, and then she puts it in the tea and gives it to him basically at breakfast. And so at breakfast, Cyril's asking if Alma, if Reynolds wants Cyril to get rid of Alma, and he's like, no, like, and he's like, okay, but Cyril's like, well, like, then be nice to her because I like this one, you know, so stop being a dick and just be nice to her because this is a good one. And and then after breakfast, but before that, during the thing, and she's like, don't you pick a fight with me, like basically like puts him in his place too, like, so she seems to be one of the only people that can do it to him, and she's like, no, don't you pick a fight with me, I'll go right through you and you'll end up on the floor, and I'm the one that's gonna win, so don't even start with me. And so then we see him like coming down the stairs, and but he's stumbling a little bit. He's like holding on to the rail, and he's moving very slow, and goes into the room. The dress is finished at this point, and he's inspecting it, and he's walking around slowly, but you can tell he's a little out of it, and he's just like, it's not very good, is it? Like, it's kind of ugly. But then at this point he collapses like into the dress, like he grabs onto it to like for balance, but then he still falls. And then everyone's freaking out, like, oh my gosh, like Mr. Woodcock, like what's going on? And Alma and one of the workers get him upstairs into bed and everything, or into the bathroom, I think. And just because he feels like he's going to be sick and everything. And then two other workers go talk to Cyril and say, like, Mr. Woodcock, he's sick. And then she's like, what? Like, because he's like never been sick apparently. And they're like, she like can't even believe it. Like, no, like you got to be talking about someone else. And they're like, oh, like, and then the dress ripped and the shoe polish on it because he fell into it and everything. So they got to fix the dress. And then so she goes up to check on him, and then but Alma's taking care of him, and she's like, come on, Alma. But then she stays in the room with them to take care of him. And then she goes to call a doctor and everything. And then she's also going to inspect the dress, and she's telling all the women, like, hey, like, we're going to have to work all night, like, because this dress has to go out at 9 a.m. tomorrow. So no matter what. And it's like, go, if you have to make a phone call to your family, go do that at my office. But no one's leaving until this dress is done, basically. And a doctor gets there, and he comes upstairs, and they go in the room, and Alma's like, hey, like, why is the doctor here? And she's like, because I sent for him, like we're going in there to check on him no matter what, like. And she's like, no, like, I'm taking care of him. But then they barge in, the doctor like wants to check him out, but Reynolds just tells him to fuck off, literally. And then so he leaves, and but he just wants Alma to take care of him, basically. And then once then Alma goes down, like once he like goes to sleep, basically Alma goes down to like help the other ladies finish the dress and everything, and she's asking like, hey, like, what needs to be done, but her real motive is to see what Reynolds has sewn into this dress, because like I said, like, he always puts some kind of secret into the dress, and she's got to know what it is, like, because she's already jealous of this princess, and she's got to make sure. I don't know. She just needs to know for her own peace of mind, apparently. So she's like taking the stitching off of where she saw him put it in, and pulls out like a little, like almost like a tag, but it's like a little strip of fabric, and then it's like embroidered in there, "Never cursed." So it's like, hey, like I'm not cursed because I'm making this wedding dress. And I'm never going to be cursed because, like, I have found, like, this woman that I love, basically, So it is, she feels better at that. That, like, gave her peace of mind. She's satisfied with it, But then it cuts to, back to Reynolds. He's in bed, and he starts talking to someone, and we realize that the ghost of his mom is there, like, standing by the door. And I really like how they did this scene because it is just like an actress standing there. There's no like CG or weird effect, no special effects whatsoever. It's just the actress that they used from the photo that just standing there against the wall. And then and he's just talking to her, and then just kind of saying like, hey, like I feel like I hear your voice when I'm sleeping, and I wake up in tears, but now I can't understand you. Like, you're right here, and like I can't understand you. But then he gets interrupted because Alma comes in, and and that's what kind of adds to the ghost effect, is that she's walking around and like right past her, and then she doesn't see her and everything. It's nothing like scary, but it is just like, oh man, like very well done. And so she's just back to taking care of him. Then we see him wake up in the morning, and he's going downstairs, and he finds Alma asleep on like one of the couches, like next to where the wedding dress is. Like, so she basically like worked till she fell asleep, basically. And he wakes her up and is just like kind of sitting there on the couch, and he tells her that I love you, and like I love you too. And then just like, I can't imagine my life without you. And then gets around to proposing to her. And she hesitates. She doesn't say anything at first. And he's like, well, like, what is it? And he's like, no. And she's like, no. And she just laughs and says, yes. And then immediately cuts to them getting married, doing the courthouse thing. There's Cyril's a witness, and they never say, but I'm presuming that it's Alma's sister is the witness on her side, basically. And we see them at dinner, the 4 of them and everything. Then it's cutting to the honeymoon, and they're in the Alps, and she's going skiing and stuff, I guess. And then he's writing and drawing in his thing, because he designs the dress like in like a sketchbook and everything. But then we see them like at a meal, like on their honeymoon, and she's like slurping her coffee and like clinking the spoon against her teeth, and he's like, oh, okay, wait a second, what did I get myself into? And then we see them all dressed up for this Christmas party, and while they're like walking around in the like mingling with people, like they notice that Dr. Hardy, the doctor that came and Reynolds told to fuck off, he's there. And they're like, oh, like talking to him, and he's like, oh, glad to see you're feeling better. And Reynolds like apologizes for being mean to him and everything. And then the host of the party, which is the doctor's godmother, I think, and Lady Baltimore. And so she comes in. They're sitting down for dinner. Reynolds is sitting down at her end of the table because I guess he's the honored guest or whatever. And then Alma's like way down next to the doctor at the other end. But then Lady Baltimore is just one of those people that just like likes to stir the pot and start drama for no reason, just for fun. And she's like, oh, like my godson seems to like her a lot, you know? Like, oh, she hasn't even looked at you all night, you know? And then, like, the doctor's talking to Alma, and then it's just, like, even if it doesn't like, I don't think he was trying to flirt with her, but even if he was, Alma's like, you don't know anything about my life. You know, she does tell him that straight up because he just asks like a question. And it's like, no, you don't know. And she's like, he's like, yeah, you're right, I don't. And then he invites her to a New Year's Eve party. Like, hey, if you don't have plans, like, there's going to be this big party if you want to come. And she's like, okay, you know, no more on that. And then they're like playing board games or something. I forget which one they are playing. And, like backgammon or something. And, Alma's like getting the rules wrong or something. And, Reynolds accuses her of cheating, but he's just kind of giving her a hard time and everything. And he's like, well, if you didn't cheat, then you don't know how to count. And she's like, gets mad and is like, fine, like, I'll, like, you know, just gets up and leaves. But then Lady Baltimore comes and sits down like, oh, like my next opponent's here. And she sits down and then she's like, oh, like, sorry, you're married to a toddler. And then it's just like being so unnecessarily mean about Alma, and is like, oh, I don't mean to be racist, but like, is it some sort of custom to like get all upset at a party? And she's like, I just don't know what she's doing. Is she stealing? Is she attacking people? And even Reynolds is like, even though he was like irritated with Alma earlier, he's just like, what? Like, what are you talking about? But he doesn't say anything either. And so then, we find out that one of the big customers has kind of left, and it's the one we see in the beginning. It's the Countess Henrietta, something like that. I forget the last name again. Find out that she's gone to another designer, and that she's just kind of jumped ship on him, and is like, what? This is one of my biggest clients. Like, where's she gone? And like, what's happening? And then Cyril's just like, hey, like, they want like more up-to-date fashions. They want stuff that's chic. And then that like sets him off. He's like, what does that word even mean? I hate that word, like, dirty little word, chic. What does that mean? And then he's just like all frustrated talking to her. And then he starts to complain, like, I think I made a terrible mistake. I need you to help me get out of it. And he's like basically saying that he regrets marrying Alma, and that like ever since like she's moved in, I can't concentrate, all this stuff. And then, but Alma has walked into the room and hears all of this. And then, but then she like makes her presence known and just says like, hey, like the dress is ready or something like that. And then, that sets him off again, and he just gets all mad, and she leaves. But she keeps her cool, Cyril keeps her cool, and then I think that makes him even more frustrated, because he's like, oh, aren't you two the model of politeness or something like that? So yeah, after that whole... oh, yeah, no, sorry, I messed up. Before that, we see the New Year's Eve party, and then they're just sitting there at the table, and they're like, and Alma's like, hey, like, I want to go dancing, and he's like, no, like, I need to work, you know, and she's like, fine, like, I'm gonna go dancing, and he just doesn't. He's like, no, you're not. And then, but she just gets up and leaves, and then she puts on a dress and she walks out the door, and then he's like, just kind of like looking like that really just happened. And then he's like looking out the peephole, like, is she coming back? Was she kidding? And then he finally gets his coat on and everything, and he does get all dressed up, and we see him arrive like right as like the countdown's about to hit. And he's looking down into the crowd, and he sees Alma, and she's having fun. She's just like dancing, but she's not doing anything, like, she's not out like cheating on him or anything. And I don't know. He doesn't make known if that's what his fear is, but if it was, then he feels better now. So he goes, he sees her fall down, because like there's these guys in big costumes, and one of them falls over, and then it knocks a bunch of other people, including Alma, down to the floor. So he like gets down there to make sure she's okay. He finally finds her, off by the wall, standing by the wall, and then they kind of just like look at each other for a little bit, and then he kind of like shrugs, like, what do you want me to do? But there's no talking at this point. And then eventually he does like grab her, and they leave, so you don't know if they're going to dance, if he's just leaving. It doesn't show you. But then the thing happens with the, like, where he's talking to Cyril about his regrets and everything, and Alma walks in. Then that happens. And then basically it cuts from Alma overhearing this whole thing about, like, how she's not wanted, and then it immediately cuts to her out in the forest picking mushrooms again. And then we see she's in the kitchen, and she's cutting them up, and we see it's the same mushroom again. But this time Reynolds is there, like, while she's cooking, and he can, like, and he's over, like, looking at her, and he's like, has, like, kind of a suspicious look, like, she's up to something. Like, he knows that she's up to something because she's probably was, like, all cold for a little bit, or she's being too nice after overhearing that. Like, we don't see, like, anything that led to that, but you just see from his, like, expressions. And she's just, like, chopping up the poison mushroom and putting it in an omelet, and then she's, like, looking over at him, and she smirks at him, but it's kind of like a little devious smirk. And then she, like, brings the plates to the table, and he gets up slowly and goes to sit down, and he's sitting there at the table, and then she's pouring water, but she's doing it, like, real loud. Like, she's literally, like, holding the water pitcher, like, up above her head to, like, make the most noise possible. And he's just, like, he's still just, like, smirking, like, you're up to something, I know it. And they sit down, and she sits like next to him and is just looking at him, and he gets his fork and knife, and he cuts a slice of the omelet, and he's, like, making a big show of it too. And he, like, puts his fork in all slow, and then he holds it up and points it at Alma, like, look, I'm about to eat. Like, if there's anything you need to say, like, I'm about to eat this. And she just is still looking at him and smiling at him. And he puts the bite in his mouth, and he's just, like, chewing, like, so slow, and just like, it's a staring contest basically. And they're just staring at each other, and he's chewing so slow. And finally, when he does stop chewing, he's still just, like, smiling at her too. And then she says, like, I want you flat on your back, helpless, tender, loving, like a little baby. And I want you strong again. And, like, basically then says something else, but then she's like, and I'm going to take care of you. But then, like, you just need to settle down a little bit. That's all. And then he smiles, and then he swallows the bite. And then, that was the thing she said. It's like, you're not going to die, but you might wish you were going to die, but you won't die. You're just going to get a little sick, and then you'll feel better, and you just need to settle down a little bit. And that's when he swallows it. And then he says, kiss me, my girl, before I'm sick. And then they just start kissing. The music swells and everything. And then it cuts to, he's in the bathroom, about to throw up and everything. And they're just, like, smiling at each other. They're, like, giggling about this fact that they're both crazy, and that she's, like, poisoning him to make him calm down. And he's fine with it because he's like, hey, like, maybe I do need to be put in my place. And it's just so insane. Like, this whole, like, it's like the passionate, toxic relationships, but to the max, you know? And I just remember in the theater, the audible groan of realization of what was happening when he said, kiss me before I'm sick, and everyone just, like, kind of gasped and groaned, and it was so funny. And then it just, after he's sick, and then he's like, oh, like, maybe you should get that boy doctor of yours. And she's like, what? Like, don't you trust me? He's like, yeah, but just to be safe. And so she calls a doctor, and he's getting checked up. And then that's when it's like, oh, that's who she's been talking to, is the doctor. That's this whole narration conversation. It's been this, like, talk with the doctor, like, hey, like, is he okay? Like, just kind of curious about their dynamic and everything too. And then we hear the voiceover, and it's saying, like, sometimes I picture our life together. I jump forward into our future and picture our life together. And we see her, like, she's walking and pushing a baby carriage, and like it's Cyril at the park, and her and the four of them, like the three adults and the baby, and then we see back to the New Year's Eve party, and we see that they were dancing. At least I think so, or if I don't know if it's just like the imaginary part, like for the future, but that is I think my favorite shot in the whole movie is them. It's them alone on the dance floor. It's just the two of them holding each other, and then like we see that for a couple seconds, and then the other couples start kind of moving in and dancing. But it's just something about that. It's just a gorgeous shot, and yeah, she just keeps talking about like all the things she's imagining for their future. And then we see that she's been telling this to Reynolds, and he's like laying on her lap with his head on her lap, and she's like, and he says like that sounds very nice, but for right now, like what about now? And right now I'm getting hungry. And then she just smiles, and they like smile at each other again, and then we get the title over the final shot of them working on a dress in the middle of the night again, and it's just the two of them, and that's it. Like then the credits start rolling, and man, that it's a crazy ride of a movie, and it's like so subtly funny in ways, like, and I think that's something that Paul Thomas Anderson is really good at. Like he has his movies that are more obviously funny, like the humor's more obvious in something like Boogie Nights, and then even like Licorice Pizza, but then I have that's a weird one for me. I still don't know how I feel about that one. But yeah, it's the subtle humor, like in There Will Be Blood. Like there's moments in that one I'm like, is that a joke or is it like serious? But either way, like I'm loving it. But yeah, I just love this movie so much. I think I saw it. To be fair, this was during the Movie Pass times, like when Movie Pass was good before they went bankrupt because they got bought out by somebody. They're back apparently, but I missed my chance to join it. But it doesn't matter anyway because I'm a AMC A-list member. But yeah, I saw it 3 times in the theater and loved it every single time. I just love this movie so much. I feel like I get something out of it every time. Like the thing I noticed this time is the main theme, the Phantom Thread theme by Johnny Greenwood, my favorite piece of music from the movie, is playing while she's like cooking, and just like it's a little more like heavier, ominous version of the song, and it's playing over the shot of her cooking the omelet with the mushroom in it, and him watching and everything, and then it cuts out right as she starts talking and says that like, I want you flat on your back and you're not going to die, but you might wish you did. You're just going to get sick, and it's just because you need to calm down, but then you're going to be strong again. And then once he says his line about kiss me before I'm sick, then the music comes back in. And I had never noticed that it just cut out like that, because I'm just obviously the first time you're not really paying attention to those things. It is just like, what the hell's going to happen? Like, what is happening? Like, does he know? Does he not know? Is he just like accepting death? Like, what is it? And so it's nice to notice those things when you do go back. And man, just great movie, great movie. And it's what, like, Daniel Day-Lewis, like, he hasn't done anything since. He said that this was going to be his last one, and then he retires. And if that is true, and if he doesn't ever like decide to come back, because I know all the time people say like, "Hey, I'm retired," and then they come back. But so if he stays true to his word and he never does another movie, like, what a last role! Like, it's up there. I go back and forth all the time, like, with whether or not this is my favorite performance or Daniel Plainview from There Will Be Blood. And same with the movies. Like, I think these are the neck and neck Paul Thomas Anderson movies for me. And like, but also like Boogie Nights is right there too. And that's a hard one. Man, it's so hard, especially when it's like your favorite director too. But man, love this movie so much. Can't recommend it enough. So great. I had the pleasure, the first time I saw it, it was in the special 70 millimeter screening. It was this old theater in Silver Spring, Maryland. Beautiful theater. It was right before I moved from Maryland back to California. And just the old theater, like I'd never been in like an old movie house like that. No stadium seating or anything. It was just like how it used to be. I was like, wow, this is amazing. So yeah, that's it. That's Phantom Thread. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you for everyone who's been from the beginning. Thank you all to the new listeners. Love you guys. Just keep listening. Stay tuned for more Oscar updates when I finally get around to watching more of those nominees. If you don't hear from me, you'll definitely hear something after I watch the ceremony. So at least one more Oscar bonus episode. But yes, once again, thank you guys for listening. I hope you keep listening. I hope you're sharing with other people that love movies too, and like subscribe to the social media. Instagram, once again, is where I'm the most active. That's at movies they're pretty good. No punctuation in that handle at all. And that's also where I like post what the next episode is going to be. So if you want to watch along, if you're maybe like these aren't like the movies that you're familiar with, but you want to be familiar with, I'll post a couple days before the episode comes out and say like, hey, this is where it's streaming. So just to give you guys a heads up and get you watching if you haven't seen that one. So, yep. Thanks again and stay tuned for next week and have a great week. Thanks. Bye.